Good evening, you're watching London Live News at 6 with Helena Wadia. Coming up tonight, NAZANIN ZAHARI-RATCLIFFE and her family meet the Prime Minister for the first time since her release from detainment in Iran. The family say it was a warm meeting, but there are lessons to be learnt from the handling of her case. The GMB unions sign a historic deal with takeaway delivery company Deliveroo, saying it will protect over 90,000 self-employed riders. We'll have an update on London's weather in the next 10 minutes. Plus, Greenwich Peninsula's Diverse Festival returns this weekend. We'll hear about the music, art and celebrations making up the urban village fete. And ahoy there, good news for fans of reality TV show Below Deck. Captain Sandy has moored up in the capital for a new show in West London, where she speaks candidly about her incredible career. First tonight, though, NAZANIN ZAHARI-RATCLIFFE and her family today met with Prime Minister Boris Johnson in Downing Street after her release from 6-year detention in Iran. NAZANIN's husband, Richard Ratcliffe, said there were lessons to learn from the situation, including how in 2017 the Prime Minister incorrectly informed MPs that NAZANIN had been teaching people journalism before her detainment by Iranian authorities, a comment her family and employer maintain was untrue. While speaking outside Downing Street after the meeting, Richard Ratcliffe said Boris Johnson did not specifically apologise for his handling of his wife's imprisonment.
She wanted to say to him, I just want you to know that the mistake, the comments in 2017 had a lasting impact, and even when I was being interrogated at the airport, interrogated just before my last day, they brought up and said, listen, just tell us now, because obviously your foreign section and then Prime Minister reveals what you've been doing. You can tell us what you were really doing. It wasn't just you on holiday. She said, no, I lived with that for ages, and I know it was a mistake, but it lingered.
Did he apologise?
And then we talked, not explicitly. Then we talked, really about the risks for others. It's over for us. We're home, and you can see I'm lighter, I'm happier, I'm fatter again. Like life is picking up, but there are others left in harm's way. There's been 2 new French people picked up this week. There's a Swedish guy, new one, and one on death row.
Well, Tulip Siddiq, the MP for Hampstead and Kilburn, where the family live, was also in attendance at the meeting and said the Prime Minister looked shocked to hear about the impact of his words on Miss ZAHARI-RATCLIFFE. She also asked Boris Johnson to consider giving evidence at an inquiry into the 6-year ordeal faced by Miss ZAHARI-RATCLIFFE.
One of the things the NAZANIN and Richard did ask the Prime Minister is whether he would consider giving evidence to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, which is doing an inquiry into NAZANIN's case and why it took so long and all the steps taking up to having her released. So they've actually asked if the Prime Minister would give evidence, because we think that would be quite compelling and powerful, and he said he would look into that. I was really proud of NAZANIN. She was sitting next to the Prime Minister and she told him very clearly and categorically that his words had had a big impact on her and that she lived in the shadow of his words for the best part of 4.5 years. I have to say the Prime Minister looked quite shocked, I think, when she said that, but I was really proud she did say that, because she wanted to make it clear to him that she's happy now, she's grateful, she appreciates the fact that she is home now, but there was a time when the words had a big impact.
Well, that was Tulip Siddiq there. Now, plans to install permanent barriers on some London bridges to help prevent terror attacks have been postponed due to Transport for London funding issues. Work on the barriers was meant to begin this financial year. However, TfL have revealed the start date has been postponed. The plans came after an inquest into the 2017 London Bridge attack concluded barriers should be installed as soon as possible. The £35 million structures were planned for 8 bridges, including on London Bridge, Tower Bridge and Blackfriars Bridge, with the cost to be shared between TfL and the Department for Transport. Well, TfL could not confirm when permanent barriers would be installed. Now, the GMB union have said that they have signed a historic deal with the takeaway delivery company Deliveroo in order to protect 90,000 self-employed riders. The majority of riders work here in the capital. Well, the voluntary partnership agreement will see GMB have rights to collective bargaining on pay and consultation rights on benefits and other issues, including riders' health, safety and well-being. Companies like Deliveroo, Uber and Just Eat are a few of the number of organisations that work using the gig economy and have been accused of using employment law to exploit part-time and self-employed workers. Well, James spoke with Mick Ricks from the union.
Basically, it's a model that can be created by the riders themselves. So the riders will form the union. They will be the union, not officials like me. It will be the riders that will form that. It will have lay representatives. So it will be a representative model. What that essentially means is it gives the riders a voice that is currently denied them with the company. So one of the biggest benefits is to be taken seriously. And you can only ever be taken seriously if you're speaking really through one voice and not many. So the issue is it gives riders a voice. And that is going to be the central issue that will make beneficial changes for riders going forward.
Well, speaking of which, I mean, Deliveroo is not the only company operating like this in the gig economy. There's countless branded tops on bikes riding around London doing a similar service. Do you hope this then could potentially set a precedent for what's to come in terms of what you've achieved with Deliveroo?
It's very much a blueprint model because it does recognise self-employed. And again, there may be some critics about that. And I'm going to be honest, there will be people that will say, well, it recognises that this is a self-employed and not a bogus self-employed. Well, actually, the law of the land has said that these people are self-employed. I can't do anything about that. The only people that can do anything about that, if they disagree, is politicians. And politicians have failed time and time again to actually do the real decent thing by working people, because for the last couple of years, 20 times the government has promised an employment bill. And again, in the Queen's speech this week, there's an absence of an employment bill. So until government and politicians get their act together, then it's up to trade unions to ensure that void is occupied, and that working people have a voice and that they have protection. And that's what we're trying to do.
Well, in a statement, the founder of Deliveroo said they are delighted to partner with the GMB in this first of its kind voluntary agreement, and that this innovative agreement is exactly the sort of partnership the on-demand economy should be based on. Now, time for a look at travel in the capital. After long delays and nearly £19 billion, it has been confirmed that London's Crossrail project will open this month. The Elizabeth line has received final authorisation from the rail regulator, and all of the stations, apart from Bond Street, have been approved for full passenger use. The section between Abbeywood to Paddington will open to passengers on the 24th of May, and the new railway will cut times when crossing the capital, with Paddington to Canary Wharf taking just 18 minutes. Well, Transport for London is returning night tube services on the Jubilee line from next Saturday. Trains on the Jubilee line will run throughout the night on Fridays and Saturdays, joining the Central and Victoria line night tubes, which resumed in November 2021. All night tube services were suspended in March 2020 due to the pandemic, and the Northern and Piccadilly lines are said to be returning to the night service later this summer. And a planned strike by bus drivers in London has been suspended following an improved pay offer. Around 1,000 members of the Unite union employed by Arriva were due to walk out for 48 hours from Monday. Well, the national officer from the union said Arriva has now made an improved pay offer, which members will now ballot on. The drivers have already taken 3 days of strike action in the dispute, with the latest on Wednesday. Well, some buses in London will also be wrapped in purple to mark the Platinum Jubilee celebrations. 8 buses on routes that pass by some of the iconic London locations associated with the royal family, including Kensington Palace and Westminster Abbey, will form the special tribute to the Queen. Right, let's take a quick look at sport in the capital. And the FA Cup finals are taking place this weekend. Both the men's and women's Chelsea sides are facing off for their respective trophies. The men take on Liverpool in a repeat of this season's League Cup final, whilst Emma Hayes' women play Manchester City. It's the 141st edition of the men's competition, and the Blues will be looking to banish their recent Wembley woes and lift the cup for the 9th time after losing the final in the last 2 seasons. Well, Chelsea boss Thomas Tuchel had this to say ahead of the game.
Everything else would surprise me. It started with last season's win at Anfield, and started with in very early in this season with a draw at Anfield, and then a draw at Stamford Bridge, and then a draw over 120 minutes and 20 something penalties. So very close matches, very intense matches, and always we needed our very highest level to compete. But we found it in the matches, and I don't expect crazy new things from them, and actually also not from us. So the game is on tomorrow. It's a big final, a big competition, and we want to be spot on.
Right, time for a look at the weather now. It's staying dry overnight with lows of around 10 degrees. Saturday will see fine conditions with plenty of warm sunshine in the morning. There'll be cloud building through the afternoon, but it's staying nice and warm. Well, Sunday will be another nice day, but there is a risk of some light showers. And then looking ahead to the start of next week, you can expect a few more clouds and even some heavy rain showers sweeping throughout the day. But the temperatures will still remain very much in the 20s. Well, just before the break, let's bring you this. A lemon and Swiss roll amaretti trifle is to be the official pudding for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. Jemma Melvin, a copywriter from Southport, won the Platinum Pudding competition, where contestants were tasked to create a pudding that had a memorable story behind it and was fit for the Queen. Well, Jemma said her winning dessert was inspired by the lemon posset served at the Queen's wedding to Prince Philip.
It was always going to be a trifle for me for my entry. A trifle is my family's signature dish, and this particular trifle is a tribute to 3 women. It's my gran, my nan and the Queen herself. So we've got lemon Swiss roll at the bottom, we've got St Clement's jelly, lemon custard, amaretti biscuits, mandarin coulis and whipped cream, and just the decorations on the top. It's a tribute to the 3 women because my gran taught me to bake. She taught me all the elements, everything from scratch. My nan's signature dish was always a trifle. We used to call her the Queen of Trifles. And the Queen had lemon posset at her wedding. So those flavours, amaretti biscuits, are traditionally served with lemon posset. So it's all in this dish.
Congratulations to Jemma Melvin there, the winner of the Platinum Pudding competition. Well, if that's made you hungry, you're in luck, because it's time for a break now. But coming up, we'll be taking a look back at the week in Westminster and the world of politics, delving into the details in the Queen's speech and the latest in Downing Street's Partygate scandal.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to London Live News. Time now for a look at what's been happening in Westminster and the world of politics this week. Well, joining me now is John Jonston from Politics Home. John, thank you for being with us. Let's start with the Queen's speech, of course, delivered this year by Prince Charles. What were the main topics outlined?
Well, we had a kind of raft of bills that the government put forward. Not any major surprises. Quite a lot of the stuff in there, things that the government have been talking about for quite a number of months. We've had some bits on planning reforms, some stuff on the kind of sell-off of Channel 4, and some bits around energy. But the big gap missing was kind of any real targeted new policies for dealing with the cost of living crisis. There was an expectation the government might put forward some more tangible policies on that, but that was kind of missing from the Queen's speech.
Absolutely. As you said, that was kind of one of the main pushbacks. How far has that pushback on the cost of living gone?
Well, Labour have certainly seized on this, said the government are bereft of ideas, was Keir Starmer's response. I think there's a real feeling that while the government have put forward some policies for tackling this, we've seen some moves around energy bills, the council tax rebate, a real feeling that as the cost of living crisis is deepening, that the government need to be doing a lot more in getting on top of this. And that was one of the major criticisms, was that while there was kind of some vague discussion about tackling the cost of living crisis, there wasn't any real detail or real policy there that presents a kind of really tangible plan on how they're going to get on top of this.
Absolutely. Well, also yesterday, of course, it was announced that the Met Police fines for Downing Street parties during lockdown have gone up to 100. So, you know, all of this is set against the backdrop of Partygate. But Boris Johnson, not one of those fines, it's understood.
No. So while the police, as is custom, won't tell anybody who's been issued a fine under any circumstances, Downing Street have committed that if Boris Johnson is to be fined, then we would be told. And it was confirmed yesterday that he was not one of those fined in this most recent tranche. But, you know, the Met Police investigation is ongoing. They seem to be working through these events in sequence. So still perfectly possible that he may be issued with a fine or further fines as that investigation carries on. So I think, you know, obviously Downing Street will be very glad that he wasn't fined in this circumstance, but certainly not the end of the story.
And Boris Johnson seemed quite reluctant yesterday, didn't he, to answer any sort of questions on Partygate. Nothing too unusual there, I suppose.
No, I mean, he certainly kept this kind of position that he is going to say something. It's going to be a big kind of open discussion about this once the Met Police investigation is concluded. And then obviously we're going to get the Sue Gray report, this report by the senior civil servant who's looked into all of these as well. You know, that could potentially be very damaging for him, because that's the moment that a lot of Tory MPs have claimed they're waiting for before they kind of make their final judgment on the Prime Minister's position. But perfectly possible that he gets another fine or doesn't get another fine, but then the Sue Gray report comes out, and that proves to be very damaging to him. But you know, we're still some way away from that happening, and I think Downing Street hoping that the longer this is dragged on for, the less the public kind of have the appetite for reading and caring about this story.
And this second lot of fines, of course, comes as Keir Starmer has found himself in a somewhat similar position, and he's being investigated over an incident to do with beer and curry.
Yeah, this relates to an event that took place in a constituency office. He was out campaigning in a by-election, and then a number of party members and staffers all got together and had this takeaway. You know, Durham Police have said that they're re-investigating it, re-looking into it after initially concluding there wasn't any case to be answered. But Keir Starmer taking quite a big gamble by saying that he will resign if he's issued with a fine. Now, the Conservative Party saying, well, he's kind of getting out of it because he could be informed that he'd broken the rules but not issued with a fine. That's what happened with Dominic Cummings. But, you know, certainly given his quite forceful discussion on this topic so far, it is a big gamble, and it really risks damaging his integrity and also really neutering the attacks that he can make on the Prime Minister if there are further fines issued to him. So he's in quite a tricky position at the moment, and I think, you know, the Labour Party banking on the fact that all the rules were followed and that he won't be subject to any kind of police action.
Absolutely. Well, John Jonston, thank you so much for joining us for a roundup of this week in Westminster and the world of politics. That was John Jonston there. Now, Greenwich Peninsula's seminal festival, Urban Village Fete, is returning this weekend with a lineup combining music, art, community and celebration, making it one of the most diverse that the capital has to offer. Well, to find out more, Hebe has been speaking to Wayne Hemingway, the organiser of the festival, along with DJ Colleen Murphy, who'll be recording her signature Balearic breakfast show live from Urban Village Fete.
There'll be about 40,000 people down there at the Greenwich Peninsula. It starts at North Greenwich Tube Station and works its way all around through the design district and down to the park. It started in 2014. It's grown and grown and grown. It's a free festival. It's for everybody. You know, whatever taste you've got. There are 3 stages there, but there's also amazing street food. I think there's 26 street food sellers, 5 bars, loads of workshops and participatory dance. There's this thing called Land of 1,000 Dances where you can learn just about every single dance craze that's happened since the 1920s. There's the charity shop DJ where you can pick out records from this guy who's been around all the charity shops in the area, and you get up there and learn to DJ. There are so many things that artists working with young people and families to make things. It just goes on and on and on. And for the first time, we are really excited to have Colleen Cosmo Murphy, and Colleen is doing a Balearic brunch. So what you can do is you can go to all of the food traders, grab a bite to eat or a drink from the bar, and sit on a long table and be part of Colleen recording her show. And Colleen probably can tell you a lot more about it, but a lot more detail than I can.
Colleen, tell me a bit more about what you've got on Sunday, what you've got to offer for people coming to the festival.
I host a weekly radio show called Balearic Breakfast every Tuesday morning from 10 a.m. to 12 noon on Worldwide FM. And I'm bringing it to the Urban Village Fete as a live experience. And I'm so excited about it. Basically, I'll be playing from 1 till 3 p.m. in the afternoon. So it's more of a brunch than a breakfast this time. And I'll be reflecting the music that I play on the show. The reason why this music and this radio show has had such a connection with my audience is because it's really spoken to them during the pandemic. The music that I play has offered solace and comfort and kind of mental and musical nourishment, raising people's life energy and also uplifting their spirits. So I'll be playing a combination of music that kind of goes all over an array of sounds, I should say. I really hope that I'm able to help kind of transform people's mental state of mind. I know that sounds a bit heavy, but that's really the intention that I always have whenever I'm playing music.
Seems like you guys have kind of something for everyone on Sunday at the festival. What do you hope people coming are going to take away from it?
The biggest takeaway from me is just it's a Sunday. It's free. The sun's going to be shining. It's going to be very much like this. Bring your dog, bring your kids, bring your grandmother, and but put on your dancing shoes and just enjoy yourself. And I think it's a great. I was talking to a friend who'd never been before, and she's got three kids, and I said, this is something where you can bring the kids to experience a festival and not have to camp, and at a time where the thing that I love most about this and the generosity of it, and it's the generosity of the developers that are paying for this, is the fact that we're in a cost of living crisis. And people want to get together with other people. And festivals can be very expensive. It can be 200 quid to go to a festival. Here you experience a festival with great performers like Colleen and many, many more. And it costs you diddly squat.
Well, that festival will be taking place throughout Sunday across Peninsula Square. You're watching London Live News with Helena Warrior. A reminder of our top story coming up after the break. Plus, good news for any Below Deck fans. The star of the hit reality TV show, Captain Sandy, will be discussing her new show on stage in the West End.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to London Live News. A reminder of our top story. NAZANIN ZAHARI-RATCLIFFE and her family today met with Prime Minister Boris Johnson in Downing Street after her release from 6-year detention in Iran. NAZANIN's husband, Richard Ratcliffe, said there were lessons to learn from the situation, including how in 2017 the Prime Minister incorrectly informed MPs that NAZANIN had been teaching people journalism before her detainment by Iranian authorities, a comment her family and employer maintained was untrue. Well, speaking outside Downing Street after the meeting, Richard Ratcliffe said Boris Johnson did not specifically apologise for his handling of his wife's imprisonment.
She wanted to say to him, I just want you to know that the mistake, the comments in 2017 had a lasting impact, and even when I was being interrogated at the airport, interrogated just before my last day, they brought up and said, listen, just tell us now, because obviously your foreign section and then Prime Minister reveals what you've been doing. You can tell us what you were really doing. It wasn't just you on holiday. She said, no, I lived with that for ages, and I know it was a mistake, but it lingered.
Did he apologise?
And then we talked, not explicitly. Then we talked, really about the risks for others. It's over for us. We're home, and you can see I'm lighter, I'm happier, I'm fatter again. Like life is picking up, but. There are others left in harm's way. There's been 2 new French people picked up this week. There's a Swedish guy, new one, and one on death row. And we talk, about that risk. And specifically, listen, please do what you can. There's a guy, when they're really threatening to execute someone, that's a real red line, and that's a warning signal that if they're willing to kill one person, they'll be willing. Everyone's not safe. So please do what you can for Murad and the other Brits, but also do what you can for all of those being held. And he said, listen, I wasn't aware of the case, but I will do what I can.
Now, from a super yacht captain with 30 years experience to appearing on the hit TV series Below Deck Mediterranean, Sandra Yawn is now embarking on a new venture. She's bringing her world premiere show Captain Sandy live to the Lyric Theatre. The yacht captain will delve into her incredible career, including how she beat cancer, survived pirates, overcame addiction and built an outstanding reputation in charge of super yachts. Well, Henry has been speaking to her about her time on Below Deck and the live tour.
Whoa, time flies. It's been so many years. I mean, we're going into season 8, season 7. And for me, it landed in my lap. I knew a colleague who knew the showrunner, suggested a female captain. Next thing you know, I get a phone call as I'm laying in the hospital after a motorcycle crash, diagnosed with kidney cancer, and said, hey, do you want to do this show? And my friend's like, don't do it. Don't do it. It's bad for your career. And I thought to myself, it landed in my lap. So when things land in your lap, there's a reason for it. So I thought, no love lost if I don't get it. So I pursued it and it happened. And it's crazy when you think about it, because I never thought I would be on television ever in my life. Never even had a desire to be.
Well, people love your attitude on the show. You say it did fall into your lap, but what are some of the best things and worst things about being on the show? Because there's obviously a lot of fun, but also a lot of drama as well.
You know, what I love about the show is the production side. You know, there's 3 different sides to the show, right? There's the Bravo network, you have the producers, and then you have the cast. And the reality is, we all come together to work together. It's about navigating personalities, and you learn how to do that. The greatest thing that's happened out of this show is it reached so many millions of people to show them there are opportunities in the maritime industry. You too can get a job in the maritime industry. I was kicked out of 11th grade. I didn't go to college. The maritime industry, in my personal opinion, sort of saved my life. I got sober and it made it all possible. Think about this. How many people had no idea this industry existed? They made that possible.
That's so true. The show has people from all over the globe, but have you got a favourite person from the show?
Apart from the producers? Not really. You know, honestly, I feel like people cross your, it's like seasons, right? You have people in your life for a season or sometimes the entire lifetime. And when they cross my path, and I just do everything I can to help them excel in their career. If they're there for a career, if they're there for television, I don't really have time for that. I really like to invest my time in people who want a job in the maritime industry, because TV's here today, gone tomorrow. So many people on reality TV, next thing you know, you're not asked back, right? I think you need to think long-term.
Well, let's talk about the show on Monday night, because you'll be discussing not just Below Deck, but your whole career. You've mentioned some amazing stories already there about how the maritime industry saved your life. Just how did it save your life then?
It offered me an opportunity, because I felt like such a failure in life, to be able to step into something that was so close to successful people. When you think about it, we're shoulder to shoulder with the people who pretty much are the decision makers on the planet. And you're standing next to them and having conversations with them. And so that for me was one of the greatest miracles in my life, is to be able to go from, I don't want to give it all away, but the person I used to be, to standing on the bridge as a captain next to someone who actually founded a bank, or, is a CEO of a massive company. That's pretty cool.
Being a female captain in the industry, what's it been like for you over the last 30 years? Because we see in the show you're a very commanding figure, but also a bit different to others in the industry about how you grow and nurture someone.
I think it's being a female that has that side, honestly. It's not that the men versus women, it's just the entire generation of people and their way of thinking with women at the helm. That is changing little by little. And it's women like myself, like Tracy Edwards, like all these incredible women at the helm, CEOs of Celebrity Cruise Line, Lisa. There's so many women in those roles that are showing people, hey, we can run companies. And to be honest, as a captain, you're running a company. But as a captain, you're running PR, restaurant, resort, and you're responsible for lives at sea. So there's that extra level, which makes it difficult. And I think as a woman, don't go in and say, oh, they don't listen, they don't do this. Just my sister taught me this. She was in a male-dominated role for a big pharmaceutical company. And she said, Sandy, I learned. I educated myself. I walked in with knowledge, because knowledge is power. And that is what makes you successful. Put the time in to learn your craft, because that's what's going to change their mindset.
There we are. Captain Sandy Live is on at the Lyric Theatre on Monday. Time for a final break now, but coming up, stunning portraits of the Queen at an exhibition a stone's throw from Buckingham Palace. James Nichols will show us the work celebrating the upcoming Jubilee.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to the final part of London Live News. Time now for a special edition of the Art Review with James Nichols. As we head towards the Platinum Jubilee, James has been exploring the impact the Queen's image has had on the art world.
Welcome to a special edition of the Art Review. As we celebrate the Platinum Jubilee, we'll be looking at how the Queen's reign has been captured on canvas through hundreds of portraits created during her 70 years on the throne. We'll be at the Mall Galleries for a special royal exhibition. But first, I caught up with the National Portrait Gallery's Chief Curator, Alison Smith, to find out more about the history of royal portraits and how Her Majesty has contributed to that tradition.
Royal portraiture is so important throughout history because it really helps establish the image of the monarch. It's to do with image coining, really. So people, the subjects, further afield, they can recognise who the monarch, the head of state, is. So it's partly to do with a likeness, but over and above that, the royal is a symbol. They embody certain values. It's to do with continuity, stability. They embody the moral tenor, the moral values of the nation. They often set a moral example too. So it's the individual and what the individual represents.
So, responsible for the National Portrait Collection as the Chief Curator, how far back did the royal portraits go and how have they evolved so dramatically?
Well, the earliest royal portrait we have in our collection is of Henry VII, although we have later representations of some of the Plantagenet kings, but they go from the Plantagenets all the way up to the present day. So if you look back to some of the early portraits, they tend to be quite schematic and quite iconic. When I say iconic, like a religious icon. So it's more what the person symbolises than who they are as a particular person. But if you go back to the Tudor portraits, for example, and think of Henry VIII or his daughter Elizabeth I, those portraits tend to communicate power. So Henry VIII looks like a thug, you might say, often padded out to convey the idea of bulk. And in the famous Whitehall cartoon, his feet are implanted firmly on the floor, as if he's a sort of an oak tree, really. The idea that I am here and my dynasty is here to stay. In fact, his dynasty wasn't at all secure, hence his need for a son. Then when Elizabeth takes over, she becomes the Virgin Queen, fashioning an image which is often to do with artifice and remoteness. So she often appears frozen, like an ice queen, with this white face, bedecked with jewels, with pearls, again the heavy padding and embroidery, which all conveys an idea of someone from another planet. As you move on through time, the portraits are grand and idealised, but the nearer you come to the present day, and particularly with the emergence of the idea of the constitutional monarch, they become more like real human beings.
Queen Victoria was the first one to introduce photography about the family and the sense of monarchy. Was that not so?
That's right. I think domesticity comes into it a lot, particularly this is one of the problems of being a female monarch. I mean, if you think of Victoria, this was a time when there was this doctrine of separate spheres, man for the field and woman for the home. And yet, as the Queen, later, the Empress of India, and overseeing this vast empire, she had this sort of, huge international role, which she had to marry with her domestic role as being a wife and a mother. So not of the portraits she is shown as being a maternal figure for her own family, and then a widow, but also she becomes a mother to the world, to the empire. She becomes this imperial mother figure. It's quite interesting seeing these portraits and how the image of the Queen has shifted from the time of her coronation in 1952 all the way through to the present day. And how they've shifted, and at the same time they've remained pretty much the same. There's quite a lot of control and behind the scenes work going on in the way the Queen presents herself. So the painters have to go through intermediaries. There's a discussion about the setting, which drawing room it's going to be presented in, how long the Queen will sit for, how many sittings she will give to the artist, and for how long.
Which resonate with you? Which portraits of Her Majesty resonate with you?
I think apart from the wonderful beaten photographs, the portrait which really resonates with me is the Antigone portrait of 1969, which was commissioned for the National Portrait Gallery. It's quite interesting relating the dress and the background to the time when it was painted, because this came fast upon Harold Macmillan's famous speech he gave in the early 60s about the wind of change blowing through the British Empire, heralding the contraction of the British Empire and the loss of the former colonies. And the Queen is standing there in these robes signalling the British Empire, but at the same time sort of saying, it's all disintegrating around me, but here am I, solid as an oak, composed, solemn, committed and dedicated as ever. And it's sort of a brave statement for the monarch at this particular time.
Alison Smith there. Well, to see some of the portraits of the Queen and to meet some who have been honoured with permission to paint her, I've been at the Royal Society of Portrait Painters exhibition at the Mal Galleries.
I've had the great pleasure of painting Her Majesty 5 times. One was a big full-length one, and then 2 commissions came up to paint her simultaneously. And also, at that time, there were 2 other requests for her to sit. So actually, I was painting about 4 of her at the same time. Different dresses, different background. And it was quite amusing, really. It was sort of, which dress am I in today? The one behind me for the Rifles Regiment just came out of the blue. I have a tendency to paint the human being, if I can. And, I often say, the robes go on afterwards. The human being is there. She's sitting there looking, I hope, like I've painted her. That is the Queen. I haven't inserted anything. I have made a statement about the woman sitting there.
So we're standing in front of my portrait of the Queen here, which was commissioned for the Foreign and Commonwealth Office in 2019. And it came on the back of me winning the BP Portrait Award the previous year, which sort of put me in the frame. So when I got the email, I sort of had to read it about 5 times, really, and there's always an element of, obviously it's a great honour to be considered and asked to paint a monarch. But also there's a great deal of trepidation and fear around the whole process, because not every portrait of the Queen is greeted by the critics successfully. It can be a little bit of a poison chalice for an artist, and I think you're very aware of that from the offset.
My commission to paint the Queen came about through a prize that was sponsored by the Royal Society of Portrait Painters. And it was in, I think, 1995, and I'd entered the exhibition, the open submission, and just to get something exhibited, really. But in that year, it was not only a cash prize, which it is now, it was also a prize to paint somebody from public life. And the identity of the sitter was kept secret right up until the moment I got the phone call. I had no idea, I was just happy to get into the show. It was pretty amazing. My first sitting was the worst, I think, for me, because I hadn't met the Queen. I hadn't even been briefed on how to meet her or what the etiquette was. It was also a bit of a moving target. She didn't really sit that still. So, and I wasn't really sure what I could say. So I actually asked Robert Fellows, the then private secretary, if I could ask the Queen to sit still. And he said, yeah, well, you're the boss. You go ahead and tell her. And so I did. I plucked up courage and I said, Mom, could you just stay still for a few minutes when I just work on one aspect of your face? And but then again, she was off. A few minutes later, and I think I only had one chance to do that. So that was my impression anyway.
The Queen was already she was 93, 94 years old when I was commissioned to paint this portrait. And then by the time, and they were really cutting back on sittings at that stage. So I had been told by her diaries that I might only get 1 sitting. And then I begged for a second sitting, which I eventually got. There was a 7-month wait between the first and the second sitting. And the second sitting happened literally, I think, about a week before we all went into lockdown. So COVID was just kind of beginning to unfold around the world. So the rest of the painting process was finished in lockdown. And maybe people were just desperate for good news because the whole world had been in lockdown. This footage just went all over the world in a way that I hadn't envisaged at all. And I think actually that was when I realized what a truly global person she is, you know, that she's actually, the entire world is fascinated by Queen Elizabeth II. She's really probably the most famous person in the world. I think that's when the penny dropped, actually, for me.
I mean, you're no better a painter the day after you've painted the royals than you were before. Yes, it's very good for the career, and you get the title Royal Portrait Painter and all this sort of thing, yes. You mustn't let that affect you.
And it's 25 years since I painted that, and I feel now that I'm part of that kind of lineage going right back, you know, to Van Dyck and Holbein. I don't think I'm on their kind of level, but I'm part of that, and it's that whole historical kind of process and history of painting, really, which I'm quite proud of, really, in a way.
To realise that you are part of this continuity of art history. And again, that dawned on me during my first sitting, actually. I thought, my gosh, this is what artists have been doing for hundreds of years. And that's quite a thought and quite a sense of responsibility, really, that you take to your task.
There we are, that was James Nichols with the Art Review. Time now for a final check on the weather. It's staying dry overnight with lows of around 10 degrees. Saturday will see fine conditions with plenty of warm sunshine in the morning. There will be cloud building throughout the afternoon, but it is staying warm. Sunday will be another lovely day, but there is a risk of some light showers. And then looking ahead to the start of next week, expect a few more clouds and even some heavy showers sweeping through the day, but temperatures still very much in the 20s. Well, that's all we've got time for, but we'll be back tomorrow at 6 a.m. for London's Weekend, a roundup of what to see and do here in the capital. Well, you can also follow us on social media at London Live. From all of us here, have a lovely evening.